But ye are come to the blood of sprinkling, that speaketh better things than that of Abel. Sprinkling, as we saw yesterday, it signifies force, scattering of the blood. It indicates something of the violence of that death, violence that surrounded it. Like as though it was spurted out, splashed out. So they did it in old time as a suggestion, an indication of what was to come. From Gethsemane to Golgotha, splashed all the way, as it were. But more than that, it's like a spurting out. It splashed through the whole world, as it were. It splashed over this nation. It sprinkled that one. It came down upon that nation. The blood of sprinkling that speaketh better things than that of Abel. Savage, the savagery of the outpouring of the blood, all necessary, you saw, for men to know that they too, every nation, a Dutchman can say, I too have been sprinkled by that precious blood. An Eskimo can say, I too, I too. Men in the far north of Russia can say the same thing. Everywhere, down in the South Pole, can say, I too, I too, I too, I too. Praise God you can say, I too. Today, I too have been sprinkled. Come to the blood of sprinkling. Speaketh better things than that of Abel. And all this that we've spoken of, the sprinkling, spurting out, the scattering, the deliberate intent to show, not just give an impression, but to show the violence with which this death was accomplished. All this was possible to God. One reason only, because the gracious, the gentle, the glorious owner of that blood gave his whole heart, his whole soul, his whole mind, his whole strength, both to God and to man. He had to give it to God, of course, you say you see that. But why to man? Because it was man who accomplished God's savage work. So he had to give his mind to man. I hid not my face from shame and spitting. I gave my back to the smiter. I gave my cheeks to them that plucked off the hair. His whole heart, his whole soul, his whole mind, his whole strength, both to God and to man, to ensure that no sin would escape the fury of that cross. No man would be left with his human nature, or even a part of it, to face a holy, sin-hating God someday. In this matter, the blood speaks to you today of this one fact. If you're going to give anything to God, give it all. Don't hum and haw, and don't sort of hold back. It's between you and God, but it's really more your heart, isn't it? Whatever you give, even yourself, you owe it to God anyway. But in the giving, because it's loaned to you, you're sort of holding the tenancy of everything. You're a tenant to God for your money and your house and your clothes and your food and your life itself. You hold a sort of tenancy under his complete approval and control. But if he wants it, give it. Remember the story of the husbandmen. They said, why should we? And the Lord only sent for what was his due. So they beat up all his servants and they killed some. Then when the heir came, they thought a bit hard. They said, if we kill his beloved son, he probably leave the place with us. no one to leave it to. So when you give to God, give. Everything. If you can add a plus to it, put the plus in. But He doesn't ask for the plus. When you give your life, give your life. Don't take back part of it when you find you've got something else to do. Paul put it that way. That's why he used the word, I beseech you, brethren. Because it is a very great thing for you to ask me to give myself to someone. Vice versa. But at least your asking me might have some effect. But my seeing you giving yourself would shatter me completely. I press on with my giving, I'm sure. And so he did. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I might take it again. Freely. He stated that, a law of love. He told me what to do. He loves me because I'm doing it. I lay down my life, that I might take it, that life again. Whosoever loveth his life in this world shall lose it. But he that hateth his life, this world, meaning lays it down in this world, for my sake, shall find it. My life, he meant, of course, in his human body, with all its hideous evidence of his cruel death. It was his body. If he took so much trouble to secure his cloak, you could understand some of the joy he said. Therefore doth my heart rejoice, my glory rejoiceth, because thou hast not left my soul in hell, neither wilt thou leave my glory, or my holy, thy Holy One, to see corruption. It was his body, wounds and all, but it was his body. And he wanted that human body. That's the body in which he learned to love us by giving himself for us. That's the body he really learned to be a slave in his giving. Now he added this, no man taketh it from me. They didn't take his cheeks and pull them round and hold them steady while some of the gang, other members spat at him. He held his face. And who knows but in their savagery they must have felt some power there. Some power. That's why they got more furious. What power could he have? Hands tied behind his back, face streaming with beatings, with blood and sweat. All that. Nothing. He couldn't do a thing physically. There was power. There was life. There was salvation. There was redemption. There was the putting away of sin. All there, packed in one human, much to be disfigured body. I have power to lay it down. I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father. That is how you've got to be with the things you get. Does he want it? Amen. Does he not want it? Amen. Till he does, I look after it for him. It is required of a steward that he be faithful. I think that's one of the characteristics God wants. You see that in the story of the men who each got a pound. Every man had to account for the pound. Even the man who hadn't spent it. That passage which shows his laying down his life and taking it again is in John 10. I do not remember the first numbers. The shameful death of Christ on the cross was his own responsibility entirely. This is the third time I'm saying to you in the third study, when you crucify your flesh, when you give yourself to be crucified and God accepts you and crucifies you, so to speak, don't complain to him of your troubles. I mean, Christ complained to him of the troubles he is in, and what I mean is don't ask to be freed of them, because you took it on. You take up the plough and you lay it down, and God's finished with you and the plough, that is. The word I'm taking to emphasize this is himself. I'm taking it all from Hebrews, there's not many. Hebrews 1:3. Who, when he had by himself purged our sin, he did it himself. He got no assistance doing it. And it says it like this: who being the brightness of God's glory. That is, currently he was still the brightness of God's glory. Currently he was the express image of God's person. He didn't come away from it. He brought it with him, showing it in different ways. Express image means the exact expression. Brightness means the radiant manifestation of his glory. And upholding all things by the word of his power. At the time that the writer said he purged us from our sins, by himself, the same brightness, the same express image, and the same word of power, by himself, purged our sins. He himself sat down on the right hand of the Majesty on high. It's a personal identification by the Spirit of Christ with the work of the cross. Your giving is your giving. Ananias was quite free. You're quite free to say, supposing you suddenly got a gift of £100. You're quite free to say, Lord, here's £5. Don't feel guilty about it. That's being legalistic. You can't feel guilty about anything you want to do. Don't, on the other hand, give the £100 and then feel regretful you gave it. Be free. Be free. The cross was freely taken over, spoken of freely by God. He gave all the details. But Jesus Christ went to the cross because he took himself to the cross, from heaven down to earth. His Father loved him because he said, I will do it. No man took it from him, so he went on his way. Hebrews 2:14 to 18. Being a complete give over. For as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself, that is the brightness of God's glory and the express image of God's person, and the upholder of all the worlds by the word of his power, he himself took part of flesh and blood, came into flesh and blood, took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him, had the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. For verily he took not on him the nature of angels, but he took on him the seed of Abraham. There again you see the definiteness of God. Man is a sinner, so he took on man. He literally took him on. Took his body on, and then took him in his thousands, mankind. But he took on him the seed of Abraham. He didn't come part spirit, part man. He was made flesh. And inside that human body was that holy thing called the Son of God. Therefore in all things it behoves him to be made like unto his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make reconciliation for the sins of the people. For in that he himself had suffered, being the brightness of his glory and the express image of God's person, and continuing to uphold all things by the word of his power, he suffered being tempted, that same person. You don't change your nature, and you don't change your body by making it over a living sacrifice. You make yourself over, more perhaps than your body. Yourself is the thing that dictates the pace of your giving, in that he himself. Chapter 5 of Hebrews. For every high priest taken from among men is ordained for men things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sin, who can have compassion on the ignorant, on them that are out of the way, for that he himself also is compassed with infirmity. Christ was like that. He himself now was launched on this road of human living, and by reason hereof he ought, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer for sin. Didn't have to, but if he'd come the way the people came, he would have to, according to the law. But it's so identifiable. You've got to identify yourself with your offering. You've offered Christ to God, you go in on that offering, you've got to identify yourself with Christ. You've offered Christ yourself, you've got to identify every part of you with yourself, so that there's no hanging back on any part of your life. By reason hereof, he ought, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer the sins. The high priest had to do what a high priest had to do. So it was, he couldn't stand aloof from the people and say, those are all your sins, doubtless they were, and those sacrifices specified by God. But his turn came, perhaps he started it, the Day of Atonement, he started with his bullock. And no man taketh this honour unto himself, but he that is called of God, as was Aaron. So also Christ glorified not himself to be made an high priest. Everything that he submitted to was at the call of God. I said before that you never hear Christ having said, Lord, use me. It was far more satisfying to him to say himself, I do always those things that please him. Himself. His own responsibility. He took it on. He left aside the nature of angels. He took on the seed of Abraham. So he was committed to us. He took it on. 6:18. This, I'll read this verse. I had the wrong reference. But it could be applied to Christ, as also to God. For when God made promise to Abraham, because he could swear by no greater, he swore by himself. That was Christ speaking to Abraham. I've sworn by myself. It's also Christ speaking in Isaiah 45, where he said, I've sworn by myself, that unto me every knee shall bow, every tongue shall swear. It was God who swore that Christ should be a high priest. But it's a beautiful verse, and anyway it identifies Christ with the sacrifice, with the offering, and with the high priest. It identifies God in the same manner. He made it his responsibility to get a high priest together and to decide the sacrifice, because a high priest was responsible to God. Aaron didn't kill any old bullock or any old animal. He killed the bullock that God wanted. He swore by himself. Hallelujah. It's a complete committal. Now, when you commit yourself today, as I'm sure you will, don't forget it's under the speaking blood you're doing it. The blood itself, which has the authority to demand every ounce of your life, because that sprinkled blood speaks of every ounce of another life laid down for you. Chapter 7, verse 26 and 27. A certain high priest became us, who is holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, made higher than the heavens, because he went into God's heaven, into the holiest of all, as the high priest went once every year, not without blood, of course, who needeth not daily as those high priests who died on the earth to offer up sacrifice, first for his own sins, then for the people's. For this he did once, when he offered up himself. Now his death was once, but the offering took some time, didn't it? He could have withdrawn at any moment. That's what I'm trying to impress upon you. It's one of the chief messages of the speaking blood to God. Speaks of someone who offered himself. Just that. If you've offered yourself, what else have you got? If you offer your money, it's part of you. If you offer your house, it's part of you. When you offer yourself, it's all of you. You can't offer more, because you have no right to any more than yourself. For the law maketh men high priests which have infirmity. But the word of the oath which was since the law maketh the Son who had no infirmity, but who came down to bear ours, who is consecrated forever and more. Ye are come to the blood of sprinkling, which speaketh better things than that of Abel. It was Christ and not God who said, nevertheless, I must walk today and tomorrow and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet perish out of Jerusalem. I must walk. God never told him you must. But he said he must. Because when you give yourself to God, you must. No one else tells you must. You tell God, I must. Many is the time when things have so overcharged me that I have made what I call a firm decision to change the course of my living. But when I got down to grips with the matter myself, when I called it all out to God, there was no answer from heaven. But I felt fine, and there was no solution of my problem, but I felt fine, because I had just said, I can't not serve you. I just had to say it. I must. He said I must. I said to him, I can't not serve you. That's what you come to when you're dealing with God. Don't forget that. If you made some half promises to God, either withdraw it all and make a fresh one, or complete the promise. Or if you said, which is worse, with your mouth one thing and you're still hanging about in midair, well, please hurry to repentance and put it all right. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, which have come through us through that great outpouring, that ye present your bodies. You don't have to do anything with them. Present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable in his sight, well pleasing to God. Christ and not God said, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected, be killed, and after 3 days rise again. Christ and not God said, as the lightning which lighteneth out one part under heaven shineth unto the other part under heaven, so shall also the Son of Man be in his day. But first he must suffer many things and be rejected. You can add must there because that's the way the English goes. It can mean must, but only put in one must. But first he must suffer many things, and must be rejected of this generation. First, that came first. First must suffer and be rejected, be killed. But must walk today. You have to do that first. Walk today and tomorrow and the day following. He didn't precipitate his death. He just fulfilled his Father's schedule. And so you've got to do that as well. You've got to give yourself. Then you've got to realize nobody governed that giving but you. It's no good being another Ananias and making excuses. Give it or don't give it. But we get so religious. I think it's especially applicable to money, because money, I only realized a long time after I was a Christian that religious people and Christians worry a lot about money. What should be done, what shouldn't be done, so on and so forth. But if you can examine the matter, it's typical of man, religious man, tithing of mint and cumin almost, and neglecting the weightier matters of justice and judgment. I think it's giving freely that's what's lacking. And it's fear to give. What causes people to be mean? Fear, basically. And you don't need any psychiatrist to tell you that. God has told us that already. There is no fear in love. No fear. Must I give that? What's that? All my time. Or what about my work? Is it going to suffer? You see, all that, there's fear in that, isn't there? That's all. Tragedy is most people would give much more if they didn't have fear. Fear and fear of death kept man in bondage. What's the fear of death? The fear that he's got a limited time in this life, in the back of our minds. So we find elderly people fearful. It's very tragic. You see them almost shivering with fear. Can't have money for the gas, so they get mean. They get tight. And then you find lots of times that children don't want to know them. It's all very tragic. Fear, fear, fear. Oh, I don't want to know my mother. She only wants money from me. Why does she? Because she can't see how she can get it. She has to live as well as her son, and she has to have fire and heating and clothes and food. But it's fear. Oh, God, have mercy on us. Don't you start fearing. If you give yourself to God, someone may get the clothing of righteousness. Someone may even get the clothing for his body. Someone will get blessed. Because certainly I've seen in our church people who've come here even from their youth and gone up. They've done well because they've been Christians. They've laid hold of God. But the thing is, your giving must pass from your mind with the giving. There must be no strings, no attachments. Forgiving is the same. God has never withdrawn his Son. Never, never, never. And he never will. It's me who goes to hell because I don't want his Son. Judas Iscariot took himself to hell. In that sense, he was put into it because he deserved to go. But he could have gone to his friend. That was his friend who could die. It was his friend he betrayed. Surely he would have found his friend helpful, sticking closer than a brother. That's the sort of person you ought to be in this church. That's the kind of friend. Less talk and more giving of yourself. Less propping your own reputation up. And more giving. I beseech you, brethren, Paul wrote. Such a man wouldn't write that lightly. So the must came first. All the blessings, blood spurted out, yes? And then the writer to the Hebrews, who I think is Paul, without any justification, of course, except the language, but ye are come to the blood of sprinkling, speaketh better things than that of Abel. Blood of sprinkling then, that was splashed over a wide area, whole of the tabernacle. Whole of the tabernacle. All the vessels of the ministry. They then went into the holiest of all and the holy of holies. Then Aaron, then the priests, then the book, then all the people were squirted out. It was thrown out. I suppose the priest got round with bowls of blood and the hyssop, through it up. A violent death, savage pouring out all that awful holy blood, speaks of the giver of life, as I've said, giving himself to pouring out all the blood in his human body for all sin. I like the message of the blood, for it speaks of this giving, and it's the only way you can learn of the giving being total. It's total. Total. Of course, there was a limited time. The blood is not still pouring. That's not total giving. What was required of him was his blood, and he gave that totally. And he waited on the cross in dire agony till all the blood was gone. I should think the dreadful weakness of that bloodless body was more agonizing at the end, perhaps, than the brutality of the wounds. The giver of life, giving himself. I am become a stranger unto my brethren, and an alien unto my mother's children. Why? For the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. You see, in your giving you cross swords with everybody, even those who love you. That's what he cried out to God. That's Psalm 769. The extreme urgency of God's demand laid hold on him, and become a stranger unto my brethren. After he left home, he never met them as he could have been. How many of us take time and trouble to cultivate, which in ordinary circumstances is allowable, but when you become a Christian, your circumstances are all extraordinary. The word Julie used last night, supernatural. You're living a supernatural life. You're serving God in this world while performing your normal chores throughout the life, to people and to things. I will become a stranger unto my brethren, and an alien unto my mother's children. It means the same thing, but he included his mother in it. But it's good to know that Judas, the one who wrote, Jude was one of his half-brothers. James, who wrote, was his half-brother. The brother of John was killed with the sword. Yes, and at the end his mother and brethren were found. At the end of his ministry, and his death, and his resurrection, and his ascension, they were found in that upper room, waiting as keenly as his apostles, to be filled with the Spirit, whom her son and their brother was going to send down from heaven. Isn't that wonderful? Wonderful. Wonderful Christ. Wonderful. Anyway, he felt it all keenly. Psalm 69. For the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up. Extreme urgency of God's demand. The expression of God's great desire. Perhaps today we've reached, possibly, perhaps I'm saying, the crunch in some of your lives, the crux of all your inward dissatisfaction. The reason why some of us get a chip on our shoulder and a bee in our bonnet, or whatever people may mean by that, what I mean is get a line and plug it, instead of being approachable to all men on every point in the scripture, and being satisfied that you're living your life flat out for him. Perhaps because you haven't done that, you haven't answered the extreme urgency of God's demand upon you. I don't know, of course. That could be. If at any point in your life, shall I put it this way, you haven't really answered God's call at any point in your life, you will be a dissatisfied, what the world would call a frustrated, religious man or woman. And it's only your own fault. You will be incapable of living that easy, peaceful, and therefore powerful life which is like a medicine in itself, especially today when nobody has an easy, peaceful, powerful life anywhere in the world. Where people are not just glad to see you because they like you, or like your family love you, but they're glad because you brought something they haven't got, and they benefit from it, they convert it, they change out of their own horrible natures into that lovely divine nature. Well, that's all we're here for. I'm only suggesting that dissatisfaction in the Christian life comes from not pleasing God. Expression of God's great desire. It's touched you and you've left it. Extraordinary pressure of God's determination for this terrible work to be done by Him as God required it. All that had taken possession of Him to the exclusion of everyone, including Himself and everything else. In my years of ministry in this church in Acton, I've seen time and time again, sometimes some of you are present here, I've seen on your faces the great call of God to your soul. I've seen faces puckered up with joy and emotion. And sometimes I've seen the struggle of coming out of that. Whatever goes on, the person only is responsible. I'm not. But some of those I've seen have gone their way, not His way. They'll never be right. Never be right until they get it right with Him. It's not to do with you or me that they may have left the church or left our gathering. When I go, you'll find if I go badly, it's because I'm disgruntled. Why am I disgruntled? Oh yes, I'll produce names out of a hat, but it's my withdrawal from something He said. My knowing I should do it, my wanting to perhaps, like my lack of faith or desire to pay the cost, the price, you see. Love, I call it, love. For the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up, and the reproaches of them that reproach thee are fallen on me. He took it, he had to take it all because they can't see God. So they took it out on Him. Now people can't see Christ, they'll take it out on you. If you take up His call. What am I saying all this to you for? What does the blood sprinkling mean? It means your ultimate unshaken happiness. I don't know if any of you are really happy. How do I say? Of course you're happy in a sense. But there are ways I could easily test that. Most Christians are a bit uncertain in their relationship with God. And that, I suppose, is because there's not this frank giving and taking. If you can't give God frankly, you can't take. You'll hesitate. I tell you, it goes both ways. People who are absolutely generous and give freely, they take with the same graciousness, or receive, if you like. God is just the same. Neither you nor God would overdo it and say, how wonderful. All right? He takes it, not for granted, mind you. You get it back 100-fold. But you get it, but He takes it. Expects it, like you expect from Him. That's the kind of upbringing in heaven. That's different to the earth, isn't it? I mean, in which country's language would you hear a person say, who is my mother and my brethren? Looking at a motley group of all kinds of people. And being yourself very close to God and saying, you're my mother, pointing to a woman who might curse awfully. You're my brother, because you do the will of God. They've come out of all that. Doing the will of God. Where do you hear that language? It makes heaven a very warm place, you know. It's open hospitality. But it's got its condition. You've got to live like I live, says God. I've got no other way of living. I can't give you another house. There's no room in eternity for another place. I've taken up all the room I know. My son's built a fine, good place, and I'm using that right now. So if you want to live with me, come. Give yourself to me. So up got Matthew. Oh, I like that. Or Levi. Up he got, leading his assistants to work out the cash deals. They must have been good because he was never arrested for mismanagement or whatever they would called it. It was government money. But he followed Christ. He wouldn't do wrong, you see. If he was the only man there at the time, the officer, he'd have seen to it. But he left it knowing his men. He was probably supervising. He must have been quite a big shot, an inspector perhaps, or something like that. And he went home, where he lived a luxurious life, and took his leave of his home in a great feast. Everybody said, I'm going. Where's he going from? He didn't know. But if you said, where are you going? He said, there, just outside the door. There's a man. It's the man you want to follow. Truly. Stop saying I don't follow a man. You'll catch yourself up in the net of your own pride. You have to obey men. And he lived in this world. And he called men to him. But you're not following them. They know it better than you. And if you came following them, they get to be a bit put off. And put you on the road right enough. But it's he. No, he knows no man can compete with him for your love or for your giving. The only person he competes with is yourself. That's the one he has to deal with. So don't look anywhere else for your failures. Just take yourself off to God. Get yourself out of the rags of your riches, the rags of all your self-pity, and get down before God in His glorious apparel and say, I lack nothing, I want nothing, and having nothing, I possess all things. Right? And I wept and chastened my soul with fasting. That was to my reproach, not anyone else. I made sackcloth also my garment, and I became a proverb to them. They that sit in the gate speak against me, and I was a song, the drunkard. They that sit in the gate are the judges, people who watch over things to see it's done law-abiding. From the highest to the lowest, to the drunkards, he was a mockery. What do you expect if you follow Christ? A silly thing to follow Christ. A silly thing to say if you believe you can live a life of freedom from sin. It's all silly to man. Needs mocking. So it all came down upon him. For he said, God showed me to say that. But as for me, my prayer is unto thee, O Lord, in an acceptable time. O God, in the multitude of thy mercy, hear me, in the truth of thy salvation. Deliver me out of the mire, and let me not sink. Let me be delivered from them that hate me, and out of the deep waters. Let not the water flood overflow me, neither let the deep swallow me up. Let not the pit shut her mouth upon me. Hear me, O Lord, for thy loving kindness is good. Turn unto me according to the multitude of thy tender mercies. Psalm 69, reading down to verse 21. And hide not thy face from thy servant, for I am in trouble. Hear me speedily. Draw near unto my soul and redeem it. Deliver me because of mine enemies. Thou hast known my reproach, and my shame, and my dishonour. Mine adversaries are all before thee. Reproach hath broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness. I looked for some to take pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. They gave me also gall for my meat, and in my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. The autobiography of the sufferer. From verse 13, I read to verse 21. Before it was verse 6. No. 8. 12. But now it's a prayer to God. A long series of complaints about his case. But it was only complaining of the state he was in. There was no question that that state should be relieved. Deliver me out of the mire. He was still in it. Let me not sink. He was sinking in that miry, that hellish mire. Let me be delivered from them that hate me. They was there, all surrounding him, cursing and swearing, accusing him. And out of the deep waters, you see, he's in it all. Let not the water flood overflow me. So it was. Neither let the deep swallow me up. It was swallowing him up. He was laid in the lowest hell. Let not the pit shut her mouth upon me. Was closed the gate was. Hear me, O Lord, thy loving kindness is good. Turn unto me according to the multitude of thy tender mercies. Hide not thy face from thy servant, for I am in trouble. There's his attitude. I'm your servant. I'm in trouble, doing your work. Hear me speedily. Draw nigh unto my soul, redeem it. Deliver me because of mine enemies. Thou hast known my reproach and my shame and my dishonour. He is right in the midst of it all. Mine adversaries are all about thee. Reproach had broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness. I looked for some to take pity, but there was none. For comforters, but I found none. He had gone past the end of that human giving. He was now in hell. His heart had broken. Now he was enduring hell. He gave me also gall for my meat, and my thirst. He gave me vinegar to drink. The last act of cruelty. That's giving. That's the language of the blood of sprinkling. You can't have it any other way. Dear ones, take God's message today. Language of the sprinkling blood. Terrible giving. Requested for a terrible situation. This speaking blood for these last days. In proportion to your horror of sin, will you give yourself to God. Not horror at a man sinning, but horror to sin and grips. Speaking blood for these last days. God hath spoken by his Son. And so present, so pressing was this demand, this desire, this determination to give. In him when he was made flesh, in that human body, it was there all the time, vibrating, pulsating. That a sick woman seeking healing from him came up to him amongst the crowd and touched his clothes and was instantly healed. But what's more remarkable was he felt the virtue go out of him. Because that's how keenly he felt everything. I've come to learn in this long sickness that I've been in, that he's touched with the feeling of my infirmities. He's got something to work out, and he will make it plain. Nevertheless, he felt the virtue go out to one person. Who touched me, he said. He didn't say how many. All those who touched me. And that's why Peter said, all of us are touching you, pressing you rather. Peter might have been pressed to him shoulder to shoulder to keep people off. She just came. She was a woman, a widowed woman. She might have been elderly. She just must have put one frightened hand on the garment and withdrawn. That was enough to engulf her in the healing of that love. It's giving you want. I think if you put giving and loving before healing, you will perhaps get the gifts of healing. You don't need to press God's claims upon people without success. Jesus felt virtue, force, the tremendous energy to give had gone out of him. Who touched me? They said, why do you ask? He said, somebody has touched me. They said, we can't tell you now. Somebody has. For I perceive that virtue is gone out of me. So really, you have an extraordinary man who's so full of love for mankind that he's got personal love for everybody. Every person can enjoy his own personal share of his own personal love from Jesus Christ. That's how I read that passage. Virtue. Virtue. I want to close by reading from Lamentations 12, 1 to 14. don't know if I've written it all down. I've written a part of it down anyway. Is it nothing to you, all ye that pass by? Behold, and see if there be any sorrow like unto my song. This is God speaking from the cross paths, which is done unto me, wherewith the Lord hath afflicted me in the day of his fierce anger. It's another sideline on the cross. Christ inviting inspection of what God has done to him. It's brought out in Isaiah 53, as I said before. He grew up before him as a tender plant. He was at God's mercy, and that's what God's mercy did to him. And like a root out of a dry ground, he never got any help from man. And that's what man did to him. And it's said in Isaiah, shows that men shuddered away from him. And a man who was seeking Christ and seeking salvation said to Philip, of whom speaketh the prophet? Himself, of some other man. Why? Because he saw the terrible horrors that were being done to someone who the prophet was saying was highly approved of. My God, is it nothing to you? Take that for yourself today. Go away and see if it's ever meant anything really to come to the point where you have given yourself. You haven't drawn it back. Is it nothing to you, all ye that pass by? Everything has to be given over. It's no good saying, I give all my money that I need, that I should give to God and more to God, and then go around finding fault with people. You've got to give that over to God, to not give it over, but give yourself over to God, so that you don't do those things. Some people do. Many Christians tithe of mint and cumin, and they don't worry about the weightier matters of justice and judgment. Perhaps start like that. Then you'll give perhaps more than you've ever given before, and worry 1 second about it all. Think 2 seconds. Is it nothing to you? All ye that pass by, behold, stop, and see if there be any sorrow like unto my sorrow. All that was done to him was an expression physically of what was done, what was inside him. Abandoned by God and man. Utterly abandoned. An awful looking sight. And he never asked to be rid of it before time. Behold and see if there be any sorrow like unto my sorrow, which is done unto me, wherewith the Lord hath afflicted me in the day of his fierce anger. On the cross that day, God was fiercely angry. Christ received it all. And it's gone forever now. The next time men will speak of the wrath of the Lamb, and they'll say, who shall be able to stand? They won't find any escape from the rocks, the mountains which will be slipping away like the world and the heaven, leaving them with their judge. Lord bless you, Lord bless you, Lord bless you. Answer his call, just answer it. For you are come to the blood of sprinkling. Speaketh better things than that of Abel. Answer it. Release your hearts today. Someone was asking me, what shall I do to express myself? I said, you don't need to try and explain to God how much you love this, what you've got out of your Bible study or your revelation. He doesn't want to know that. What he wants to know is how much you love him, how grateful you are to him for what you've been given, how much you adore him, how much you're prepared to do whatever else you afterwards find out from this message. At least give yourself to God. Pray. How many of you come here? Only now and then you pray. Some of you have been here a week, some less than a week. Each time you should pray. Not to me. I don't want to know. But I want God to know that you want to thank him. You can't thank me for the message. You know it's from God. But you must thank God Let's pray. Let's pray. Let's give ourselves to